All right, so are you ready to dive into this world of decentralized finance, like DeFi and central bank digital currencies,
Yeah.
CBDCs? We're going to be looking at these two technologies and how they're kind of shaking things up in the financial world.
Yeah, I think we'll see.
We've got two sources to unpack today.
Yep.
One is this video that breaks down DeFi's potential, and then the other is a text that explores the rise of blockchain technology and CBDCs.
Very cool.
We're going to be covering a lot from this interesting acronym. They use RIP cord to evaluate these blockchain projects, to even the possibility of tokenizing like almost anything. And we can't forget about all those people all over the world who don't have access to traditional banking.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting questions surrounding the potential impact of these technologies on global financial inclusion.
Yeah, for sure. So this first source jumps right into the hype surrounding DeFi, claiming it could completely revolutionize finance. And they even compared it to Bitcoin when it first came out. But what I thought was really interesting was this IP cord acronym that they use to evaluate blockchain projects.
Yeah, RIP-Cord stands for Revolutionary, Immutable, Public, Collaborative, Open, Resistant, and Decentralized.
Wow.
It highlights the qualities that really define a valuable DeFi project.
Oh, okay. So you're saying it's not just about being digital.
No, it's about embodying these principles in a meaningful way.
Okay, I got it. So it's kind of like a checklist to see if a project is truly innovative and impactful, right?
Exactly.
Does it do something new? Can it resist censorship? Is it open for everyone to use?
Yeah, it prompts us to ask, does this DeFi platform genuinely live up to these principles, or are they just using buzzwords? And that's an important question for you, too, when you're exploring different DeFi platforms.
Yeah, okay.
Think critically about whether they truly embody these IP core characteristics.
I like that's a good point. It's really easy to get caught up in the hype, but it's important to think critically.
For sure.
And it's not just about the tech itself, right? This source talks about DeFi's potential to actually give power to people who've been excluded from traditional banking systems.
Yeah, about 6.5 billion people globally.
That's a huge number.
It is.
So imagine a world where access to financial tools and services isn't determined by where you live or your background.
Right.
We're talking about securing loans, making investments, raising capital.
Opportunities that have been out of reach for so many.
Now, that's what I call a game changer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and dive into our second source, which focuses on the rise of CBDCs.
Okay.
It mentions that over 70% of central banks are exploring them.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal in the world of finance.
Yeah, seems like it.
It signals a potential shift, you know? CBDCs represent a really fundamental change in how we even understand money.
Okay.
They're essentially digital versions of a country's fiat currency issued and backed by the central bank.
And there's two main types, right? Wholesale and retail.
You got it? Wholesale CBDCs are primarily for large transactions between banks, streamlining the inner workings of the system.
Yeah. Okay.
Think of it as like upgrading the plumbing of the system. Retail CBDCs, on the other hand, are designed for everyday use by everyone.
So like digital cash in your digital wallet.
Precisely. China's digital yuan is a good example of a retail CBDC that's already being used. It allows for instant payments and potentially reduces transaction fees.
It makes you wonder about the impact on regular banks.
Yeah.
If people start using digital yuan or, digital dollars for everyday purchases, what happens to banks? Do they become obsolete?
That's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
Some believe CBDCs could cut out the middleman, reducing the role of banks. Others think that banks will adapt and find new ways to provide value.
Okay.
Maybe by focusing on specialized services or integrating with CBDC systems.
So it's not a winner-takes-all scenario, but kind of a shift in how the different players interact.
Right. It's more likely a dynamic interplay between CBDCs, banks, and other financial actors. The main takeaway, I think, is that the financial world is changing, and both CBDCs and DeFi are driving that change.
It's like watching a financial makeover in real time.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have DeFi trying to decentralize finance and give individuals more power. And on the other hand, you have CBDCs that are changing how central banks and money itself operate.
Right.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
But there's one more piece to this puzzle that we need to look at, and that's tokenization.
Tokenization is such a fascinating concept that bridges both DeFi and CBDCs.
Okay.
Essentially, it's about representing real-world assets digitally on a blockchain. You can tokenize almost anything from stocks and bonds to real estate and even artwork.
So instead of holding a physical stock certificate, you would have a digital token that proves ownership.
Exactly. And this opens up a world of possibilities.
Okay.
Tokenization makes assets more liquid, more divisible, and easier to access.
Hold on, divisible. What exactly does that mean in this context?
That's a great question. Divisibility means you can break down an asset into smaller units. Imagine a rare painting worth millions. Traditionally, only a very wealthy individual could afford to buy it.
Right.
But if that painting were tokenized, it could be divided into thousands or even millions of smaller tokens. This allows many people to own a fraction of it,
Oh, I see.
essentially democratizing ownership of valuable assets.
That's pretty cool. It levels the playing field for investing in high-value items.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this concept of fractional ownership that's been making waves in the crypto world.
You got it. Fractional ownership is a key benefit of tokenization, opening up investment opportunities that were previously inaccessible.
Okay.
And it's not just about art. Think about real estate, private companies, or even intellectual property. Tokenization could change who has access to these investment opportunities.
And wouldn't that change who profits from these investments as well?
Absolutely.
It's not just about access, but who gets to participate in the gains.
Tokenization has the potential to reshape the investment landscape and make it more inclusive. And it goes beyond just access. It can also boost market efficiency and reduce transaction costs. Since everything is tracked and managed on a blockchain, you need fewer middlemen and paperwork, making the whole process smoother.
DeFi wants to revolutionize financial services.
Right.
CBDCs are potentially reshaping the concept of money.
Yeah.
And tokenization is making assets more accessible and liquid.
It's like a complete overhaul of the financial system.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. But before we move on, there's one more thing I'm kind of curious about, and that's stablecoins.
Okay.
They seem to be this bridge between the world of crypto and traditional finance.
Stablecoins are a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
They address one of the biggest challenges facing cryptocurrencies, their fluctuating values.
Yeah.
The price of Bitcoin or Ethereum can swing wildly, making them less practical for everyday use. Stablecoins, on the other hand, are designed to maintain a stable value by pegging their value to something stable like the US dollar.
So they kind of create a more predictable environment within the unpredictable world of crypto?
Exactly. This stability is vital for DeFi applications.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to use a highly volatile cryptocurrency to get a loan or make a payment. The value could change drastically in minutes, creating a lot of risk.
Right.
Stablecoins help minimize that risk.
That makes a lot of sense. But zooming out a bit, we have all these different blockchain systems and cryptocurrencies popping up.
Right.
How do they all work together? Or is it kind of a fragmented landscape?
That's an important question, and it leads us to the concept of interoperability.
Okay.
One of the challenges in the blockchain world is this lack of seamless interaction between different systems.
So what's the solution?
Well, this is where CBDCs could potentially play a significant role.
Okay.
Because they're issued by central banks and operate on a national level, they could offer a more standardized framework for interoperability. Imagine a world where you could seamlessly send digital dollars to someone using digital euros or digital yuan.
Yeah, that would make international transactions so much smoother and cheaper.
Exactly. And it's not just about convenience. Increased interoperability could also boost global trade and financial inclusion.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
From DeFi to CBDCs and tokenization, it's clear that the financial landscape is undergoing a major shift.
It's an exciting time to be witnessing these changes, and there's so much more to explore.
Yeah, there is. Welcome back. We just dove deep into all the exciting possibilities of DeFi and CBDCs. But, like any major shift, it's not all smooth sailing.
You're right. Whenever you have innovation disrupting the status quo, there are bound to be challenges along the way, and the world of DeFi and CBDCs is no exception.
Yeah, one of the biggest hurdles that comes to mind is regulation. How do governments even begin to regulate a system that's designed to be decentralized and operate beyond borders?
It's a really tough question. Traditional regulatory frameworks were designed for a centralized financial system. DeFi, with its peer-to-peer transactions and decentralized platforms, really throws a wrench into the works.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And it creates this interesting dynamic where regulators are constantly playing catch-up with the rapid pace of innovation in DeFi.
Right.
There's this delicate balance to strike, fostering innovation while also protecting consumers and ensuring overall financial stability.
It makes you wonder, will regulation ultimately stifle DeFi's growth? Or can the two coexist?
That is the million-dollar question. I believe the key lies in finding a regulatory approach that's adaptable, flexible, and collaborative.
Hmm.
It requires a willingness from both sides, regulators and innovators, to work together and find solutions that balance oversight with the freedom to experiment.
It's about finding that sweet spot, where innovation can flourish without sacrificing security and stability.
Exactly.
But regulation isn't the only challenge, right?
Mhm.
There are also concerns about security and scams within DeFi.
Absolutely. DeFi platforms are built on code, and like any software, there's always the risk of bugs, vulnerabilities, and exploits. And what makes it even more challenging is that DeFi transactions are often irreversible, so any loss due to a security breach can have a significant impact.
It feels a bit like the Wild West out there, doesn't it? High reward potential, but also high risk.
It's an apt comparison, and it highlights why it's so crucial for anyone exploring DeFi to be aware of these risks and take appropriate precautions.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence, research the technology thoroughly, and remember the golden rule of investing: never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Speaking of risks, let's circle back to CBDCs for a moment. We've talked about how they could potentially streamline payments and make financial services more accessible. But what about the flip side? Are there any potential drawbacks or risks associated with CBDCs?
There are always trade-offs to consider with any new technology.
Right.
One of the most significant concerns with CBDCs is privacy.
Okay.
Since they are issued and managed by central banks, there's the potential for governments to track every transaction you make.
It raises questions about, the balance between security, transparency, and individual privacy. How do we ensure responsible use of CBDCs and prevent them from becoming tools for surveillance?
You've hit upon a really critical issue. It's a conversation that's likely to intensify as CBDCs become more prevalent.
Yeah.
And this concern about government oversight ties back to our earlier discussion about DeFi's emphasis on decentralization and empowering individuals.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating tension between two very different approaches to the future of finance.
It's a question of control, isn't it? Who ultimately has control over our financial data and transactions?
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think about the potential implications for our individual freedoms and financial autonomy.
Precisely, and it's not just about privacy. Another potential risk with CBDCs is the impact on commercial banks. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth revisiting.
Good.
If people start holding their money primarily in digital wallets issued by central banks, what happens to commercial banks as we know them?
Do they become obsolete? Or do they find new roles to play in the financial ecosystem?
It's still early days, and there are no definitive answers. Some experts believe that CBDCs could disintermediate banks, reducing their significance in the financial system. Others argue that banks will adapt and find new ways to provide value, perhaps by specializing in certain areas or integrating with CBDC systems.
It seems like there's a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential for innovation and adaptation.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that we're still in the early stages of this technological evolution. DeFi and CBDCs are constantly evolving, and it's too soon to definitively predict the long-term consequences. However, the takeaway here is that the financial landscape is experiencing a fundamental transformation.
And that transformation has the potential to impact all of us, whether we're actively investing in crypto or simply using digital payment platforms, staying informed. Understanding the risks and engaging in these conversations are more important than ever.
You're absolutely right. These are discussions that will shape the future of finance, and it's up to all of us to participate.
Before we jump into the broader implications of DeFi and CBDCs, I think it's time for us to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. It's been a whirlwind tour of innovation challenges and thought-provoking questions. We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore what all this means for the future of money and our relationship with it. Don't go anywhere. All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into DeFi and CBDCs. We've covered the mechanics, the opportunities, even some potential bumps in the road. But now I think it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, we've explored the waves of change, but now let's lift our gaze to the horizon and consider the long-term implications if DeFi and CBDCs truly reshape the financial landscape. What could that mean for our lives?
That's what I'm really curious about. It's one thing to understand how these technologies work, but it's another to imagine how they could actually change the way we interact with money.
Yeah.
And the whole financial system.
Yeah. One of the most profound shifts could be in our relationship with money itself. Imagine a world where money is programmable, transparent, and moves instantly across borders without any hassle.
Okay.
It's a whole new way of thinking about value and exchange.
That's a pretty big idea to wrap your head around.
It is.
What would that actually look like in our daily lives?
Well, think about how we interact with money. Now we rely on banks and other intermediaries for practically everything to process transactions, hold our money, give us access to financial services. But in a DeFi-powered world, many of those functions could be decentralized and automated, cutting out the middleman.
So you're saying we could have more control over our own money and how we use it?
Exactly. You could potentially borrow and lend directly from other individuals, invest in tokenized assets across the globe, and even program your money to perform certain actions automatically. For example, you could set up a smart contract that automatically pays your bills or invests a portion of your income each month.
Oh,
It puts you in the driver's seat of your financial life.
that sounds incredibly empowering. But what happens to the role of governments in all of this?
Yep.
If money becomes decentralized, do they lose control over monetary policy?
That's a complex question, and it's something that economists and policymakers are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
It's not a simple yes or no answer. With DeFi, it's possible that governments could have less direct control over certain aspects of the financial system. However, they could also find new ways to exert influence.
Okay.
For instance, they could focus on regulating the on and off ramps between the traditional financial system and the DeFi space. CBDCs, on the other hand, could potentially strengthen the role of central banks in some ways by issuing digital currencies. Governments could have more direct control over the money supply and implement monetary policies more effectively.
So it's not necessarily a case of one system completely replacing the other, right? It's more about how these systems could potentially interact and influence each other.
It's more of a dance than a battle. We're likely to see a complex interplay between governments, central banks, private institutions, and individuals. The balance of power is still being negotiated, and how it all plays out is far from certain.
It sounds like we're entering uncharted territory, and the map is being drawn as we go. But beyond the economic implications, I'm also curious about the broader societal impacts. Could DeFi and CBDCs be leveraged to address some of the pressing social issues we face today, like poverty and inequality?
That's one of the most compelling aspects of these technologies, by expanding financial inclusion and access to capital DeFi and CBDCs could empower individuals and communities that have been historically excluded from traditional financial systems.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the potential for DeFi to reach the unbanked population, those billions of people worldwide who lack access to basic banking services.
Exactly. And CBDCs could also play a vital role here by providing a more accessible and affordable alternative to traditional banking. Imagine a world where everyone has access to essential financial services, regardless of their income or location. That kind of inclusion could be a game changer in terms of addressing poverty and reducing inequality.
It's a powerful vision of a more equitable financial future. But let's be realistic, there are always potential downsides to consider as well. We discussed some of those risks and challenges earlier, like privacy concerns with CBDCs and the potential for security vulnerabilities in the DeFi space.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial to approach these innovations with a balanced perspective and a healthy dose of caution. We need to carefully consider the potential downsides and actively work towards mitigating those risks. But I believe the potential benefits are too significant to ignore.
It's about finding that sweet spot, embracing innovation while being mindful of the risks.
Well said. And it's a conversation that needs to involve everyone. The future of finance is being shaped right now, and it's up to all of us to engage in these discussions, ask the tough questions, and advocate for solutions that benefit everyone.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of DeFi and CBDCs, I want to leave you with one final thought. This is just the beginning. We're at the very early stages of a major transformation in how we understand and interact with money. There will be twists and turns and probably some surprises along the way. But by staying informed, participating in these important dialogues, and keeping that spirit of exploration alive, we can navigate this exciting new landscape and create a financial system that is more inclusive, equitable, and empowering for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and never stop asking those big questions. The future of finance is waiting to be written.